Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Macross Man at YouTube with another modelling video. Today we're going to look at the Nousjadeul, most likely, definitely pronounced incorrectly, a battle suit from the Super Fortress Dimensional Macross series or Robotech. Pretty much pick your poison. It is a Zentradi early weapon. Originally released by IMAI, this model kit has been picked up by Bandai and re-released somewhere around 1992. The model first retailed around 300 yen under the Bandai Boxing 700 yen. Comes in 3 blue, slightly frost textured styrene runners, set of water slide decals, coloured instructions with a colour painting guide demonstrating a basic assembly hand paint job in enamels, and a fairly simplistic cluttered instruction guide in black and white. Now this is an old style 80s model kit and nothing like how Bandai produced its 1970s, 1980s style models, especially their earliest Bandai kits, which they slowly got into the polycap stuff. If anyone's knowledgeable about the Macross models, the Ari stuff, which was the majority of the line, were quite shoddy, poorly made, poorly tooled, and assembled quite badly. There was another company that did 200 scale stuff, and the IMAI kits. These seem to be the best models out of all the original Macross model kit lines. They normally depict stranger subjects like the Zentradi, and in the strange at 1:144 scale over the 1/100 and 1/72 models today. I found the builds to be extremely charming and fun. Did have to assemble things in staggering steps by assembling a piece such as a hand or a foot and reinforcing it with super glue, putting the seam, sanding it back, and then applying the next piece such as the shin or the forearm a few days after. It was a 2-month process building it slowly while allowing the articulation to still flow. I had to attach the arms, the head, and the torso to the crutch area using magnets. That made the job a lot easier and gave me separation for painting and articulation. Not any modifications, but find a lot of seam line filling. I found the proportions and the detail, even though very deep and designed for hand painting, really appropriate, quite fun, but the model is highly inaccurate from the source material. I only had issue constructing the upper arms around the shoulders. Everything else was fairly straightforward. Getting straight into painting, primed the whole kit in Mr. Surfacer 500 and Tamiya. Recovered seams and imperfections in Squadron Putty and sanded back to bare plastic to be re-primed. So there's no obvious seam lines or modelling faults. After the final layer of primer, everything was pre-shaded black and the very bottoms shaded black. I shaded each piece different tones of silver and brown, darkest at the bottom, lightest at the top to depict light. Salt weathered it using salt and hairspray technique. Did a second layer, similar, different contrasting browns and rusts. Salt layered it again and free-handed various greens and dark greys, blues. I did go against the recommended box art and colour guide, though to my research on Google Images and Macross Wiki, I found an alternative colour scheme that I slightly remembered as the general grunt basic look from the original anime. A large array of weathering techniques and after painting effects were applied on top, but we will cover that in the third proportion of this video. Because the model was absolutely tiny, a good inch or so shorter than your standard Gundam model, I felt the need to print a 90mm wargaming style Diorama Base from my 3D printer in PLA 1.75mm, and decorated it to depict some sort of diorama using layers of very cheap styrene, a chopped up model railway stone fence, and a bit of putty. I constructed a bit of a farm style field and dirt road with a bay or hay bale. The base was covered in PVA glue with sand sprinkled on top in the dirt area. The whole base was primed and then painted black. I do plan on using flock, so underneath the flock I painted green and patches of sand. The hay bale was painted yellow, and a new type of static grass I found, a summer grass or a yellow grass, was PVA glued on top. A bright yellow static grass was piled onto the mount using PVA glue and affixed with hairspray. I painted the dirt road and coloured it further with MIG production pigments. Before that, of course, I sludge washed the fence and soil, and everything ended up with a top coat. After painting, the kit itself got a gloss top coat, and some of the water slide decals were placed. Others I would assume would be covered in rust. And using a fine tip brush and similar colours around the area, chip weathered the decal. A tiny bit of paint, heavily watered down, was dusted over the immediate surface of the decal to look like that it's going from the decal colour to the base colour, so it's sort of wearing off ever so slowly. Another layer of gloss clear to protect the decals, and the whole surface was sludge washed in black and touched up in some area with rust wash. The kit had matte clear applied on top of that. Using a weathering pencil, I highlighted some points, animated some panel lines, and in some high areas applied MIG production pigments and affixed it, sort of your sand, light rust and lighter colours. Areas around thrusters, cannon holes, whatnot had a bit of black shaded on them, and around some contours and details and areas that had working parts, a tiny amount of shadowing or black applied for extra definition. And this led to my extremely heavily weathered, out of the box battlesuit. Now the reason and the thinking behind of all this weathering, all this chipping, from my memory in the Macross storyline, many thousands of years ago, these Zentradi were clone giants, and they were produced as mercenary soldiers for whatever galactic government there was that was fighting an opposing enemy. The enemy was eventually destroyed by this war-bred giants, but they're unable to maintain or construct their weapons as a way of control for the advanced civilization to order them around. As they were flying around space and looking for remnants and encountering other civilizations, they just go around looking for more fights, more wars, and just spreading around the galaxy until they encountered the Earth. Since that they've been flying around for many thousands of years, I imagine that the paint, the rust, the weathering would just be so horrendous that these machines would not even be recognizable, but I didn't think it would be depicted in the anime due to their outdated drawing and art, though I suppose there is another story in the original source material that the materials used to make these were near indestructible. More or less, I'm extremely happy with my artistic rendition and version of story. It is slightly unrealistic of how heavily weathered this is, but my inspirations drawn looking at 20-30 year old Soviet tanks still floating around Eastern Europe and the Middle East as weapons as a last resort. Kind of a bit interesting how these items are still not completely retired. All in all, I had a lot of fun with this build. I think it's kind of cool. I'm extremely happy with the finish, regardless of any sort of very nitpicky criticisms on it. It was just a fun piece. It's a vintage build. It was something that was sitting around my backlog forever, and I was invited to build and paint this for the G Plus magazine second issue, which I hope does come out one day. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned. More content on modeling and tutorials to follow soon on this channel. Catch you guys later.